let's go to South Africa, and also how do South Africa compare to other emerging markets. So this is the scorecard, if you will, of South Africa. So as you can see, it's fairly poor. If you look at on the right-hand side, we only have one of the 12 quadrants which we can say is green, and this is the 71% adoption rate of bank accounts. So that one is actually quite good, also in a global perspective. That's actually quite high. If you start on transaction accounts, on the left, the column to the left, this is our ordinary bank accounts, or current accounts, as you would say from a technical perspective. People actually have them. People don't use them that often. Particularly using digital payments are not very common in the lower end segment. And you can see in terms of sustainability, not very sustainable. There is a huge perception that the charges are very high to maintain a bank account in South Africa. And indeed, when we look at the charges banks charge relative to almost all other economies, it's very high relative to almost everywhere else. When we ask people in our quantitative survey, why don't you have a bank account? 40% responded, it's because I don't want to pay the charges. That could be perception, it could be real, but anyway, it's something we need to look into, because that is a root cause to why people don't have trust in banking accounts, and that's why people take out their money. Interestingly also, people often distrust ATMs as well. So that's also an interesting finding. On the credit side, we have been very kind, actually. It was a very borderline red to yellow on sustainability, which probably should have ended on red, but we ended on yellow, because we know that if you look at default rates of consumer credit, unsecured consumer credit, these are loans taken to buy clothes, TV, furniture, that kind of stuff. South Africa has very high levels of default rates relative to everyone else. We have 12% of the total book of unsecured lending is in default, which means people haven't paid for 90 days or more on the loan. So it's one of the highest, actually, in the world. So we should probably have that as a red. If you look at on the insurance side, as we said, many people have insurance, but they typically have the simple funeral insurance, and they don't have much other cover than that. If you look at the economics in the insurance sector, if you look at the price levels in South Africa, they're actually quite high relative to other countries. The payouts, claims payouts, is at around 62%, which is quite high as well. So they're not cheating the customers and keeping the money. They're actually paying out at a reasonable rate. What we see is that the expense ratio for insurance companies is typically very high in South Africa, so people have a huge machine to operate. And the margin is quite good because prices are quite high, which is also why you see that people pay 12% of their disposable income to pay their insurance. We did a calculation on insurance. So we looked at people that had funeral insurance. And in many instances, the economics behind it is very poor. So we asked one of the persons that you saw in the video, what kind of funeral insurance do you have? And she said, we have many funeral policies in our family. Not only one, we actually have many. And when you did the economics behind it, you have to have a person die in that family every 2.5 years for it to make sense, rather than saving it in a regular savings account. Just to tell you a little bit about the economics and the lack of financial literacy in many. And they thought they had a great cover, and thought it was a very economical cover, but the whole concept was really not sustainable long term. On the savings side, South Africa is extremely poor at saving, extremely poor at saving. And there is this notion, particularly in the lower end segment, that people value short-term consumption, instant gratification, before saving for the future. Particularly in the male segment, we see that people want instant gratification rather than saving for the future. And there is an inflated view of what the government or the state will provide. As you saw from the first clip, I don't have to save because SASSA is going to provide a grant for me when I get old. It's actually a very common theme. People actually think that they will get a lot of money from the government and they don't need to save. And we all know the battle going on around SASSA. I'm not going to go there. But there's a huge issue. People actually don't save. And that's also relevant for the credit part of this. People don't take up loans for future value creation. So people don't take up loans to send kids to school. People don't take up loans to invest in their business. People take up loans for instant gratification, which is a huge problem in a country like South Africa, which needs a totally different spending pattern and a totally different savings pattern. And the downgrade is just going to accentuate this. If you look at the real return of savings in South Africa, inflation adjusted, is plus minus zero. So there's no sense. Actually, the economics behind savings, actually, the incentives behind savings is actually very poor. And the downgrade we would expect would just inflate this vicious circle that we have come into right now.